Welcome back to the Rain Race Podcast. I'm your host, GT Rain. Chris, off to my right, as always, that Canadian, the Maple Leaf Man, Stu, off in the Esses. Sorry to throw that one at you tonight. That's a new one.
That Canadian. I think that needs to be my name now on the show. Just that Canadian. It works. But another great evening here and getting to talk about some sports car racing.
What's not to love? Actually, an episode. You and I initially were questioning whether or not we'd be able to do it because, we were sort of talking about the end of 2024 and, we got holidays coming up and Tuesdays are going to be a little tricky, which is where they fall on the schedule, the calendar rather. But there's just so much that came out in the last couple of weeks. I figured let's slip one more in, and then next Wednesday, not Tuesday, we'll do an end of the year episode to close everything out. Do some little informal but much coveted Rain Race Podcast awards to discuss some of our favorites from 2024 to close out the season officially as we embark into 2025. Yeah, we got a big main story tonight to discuss, that being of the Genesis, we'll call it now by its official name, Genesis Magma Racing, as they will be known in the World Endurance Championship in 2026. Has unveiled some more details about that LMDh program that they will be contesting starting in 26 in the FIA WEC and then in 2027 in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Quite a few details to unpack here, though.
Yeah, some pretty exciting news. Of course, we were teased this a little while ago. Well, maybe not teased. It was more of a formal announcement, I guess you could say, at that point. But yeah, to finally get Genesis Magma Racing confirmed to be joining. Well, I guess is the Magma Racing. That's going to be the name of the factory outfit, if I'm not mistaken. So we could see. It's not likely that we're going to see Genesis Magma like Chip Ganassi Racing or Genesis Magma, insert other IMSA name here when it comes stateside, correct?
Right, and I think that's actually one of the key points here is this program is sort of going to be structured a little bit differently between IMSA and the WEC. So, of course, I already mentioned it will be a split, staggered start. And let's just start off talking about that. I think that's a good place here to kick things off. I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised to see this staggered start between both championships, but I think it makes a lot of sense. If you've looked at what other manufacturers have noted over the past year or so, Aston Martin, had to scale up their program a little bit with that 2-car requirement in the WEC. Mentioned that there were some logistical struggles related to that. Lamborghini, of course, well documented at this point how much they've struggled to accommodate that 2 championship program. Of course, they're scaling back to 1 for next year. With the future beyond that, we'll have yet to see. For Genesis here, a new manufacturer going in with perhaps not quite as large a budget. Now, this is just me making assumptions, but perhaps not as large a budget as a manufacturer like Porsche maybe. It makes a lot of sense to me to focus on one championship from year one, get the logistics sorted out there, hit the ground running the next year in another championship. You're going to have a separate team running that IMSA program. To me, again, not something I was really expecting, but something that does make sense when you're looking at it.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the key to this, though, is this could really give Genesis an upper hand compared to what we've seen from other LMDh manufacturers. If they go about this the right way, and I think the right way is you need to have whoever the team is that you opt to partner with, I think stateside in IMSA, in order to set them up for immediate success in IMSA come 2027, you need to have them heavily involved in this process. I believe it was confirmed with this announcement that the IMSA partner team is going to be confirmed sort of the first couple of quarters, probably Q2 of next year. So that brings us right into late spring, early summer. And I think it's going to be really important that whoever the team is that is selected for that is involved in the testing, is, the year one of that team running in the World Endurance Championship. That IMSA team is, they have personnel that are, understanding what the car is going through, to build up that knowledge base so that they can truly be competitive right from the word go in IMSA. That's where we've seen, that's where we've seen some of the, all of these manufacturers. Of course, it takes some time to build up this knowledge in year one, and then usually they become more competitive in year two. So I think that's somewhere where Genesis could really, take advantage of this rollout. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You look at it, and you don't want to spread your resources too thin. This is a brand new from the ground up sort of program for Genesis. It's not like Porsche, it's not like Cadillac, who have experience producing these prototype cars and have established teams that are ready to run. So this kind of an announcement makes sense. Of course, it's disappointing. We want to be talking about this car running stateside and in IMSA and in the World Endurance Championship, right off the get-go from 2026. But super exciting news, and a lot of the things about this car launch, I kept seeing, comments that it looks like Genesis is just doing this the right way. I think they're, from my outside sort of perspective, it looks like they're trying to lay a really solid foundation here for a program that can last multiple years and isn't going to be on unstable footing.
Right, and I also think this really brings forward how important the commitment of that formula is through the 2029 season in both championships, because you have to think here, and by the way, Hyundai has said they're ready to commit beyond or all the way to the end of the 2029 season. You have to think even getting on the ground in 2027 in IMSA, that gives them at least 3 full seasons to make some magic happen. I don't know if that confidence would have been there for them if they did not have that commitment from both championships right now, this early on, saying, yeah, this formula set's going to be with us for the next, what's this going to be, 5 seasons now?
Yeah.
So I think for the championship's sake, I think that was a very important commitment to make for them over the summer. And honestly, Hyundai/Genesis is not the only manufacturer we've seen get spun up in the rumor mill a little bit more recently, ever since that announcement was made. So I think that's smart on both parties there. A couple more announcements that came out of, or a couple more pieces that came out of this larger announcement. It will be called the Genesis GMR 001 hypercar, based on an Oreca chassis. You might have been one of those people who said that car looks pretty similar to the Acura or the Alpine. I've definitely noticed a trend at this point of how similar some of these cars are starting to look, but if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
Those are 2 pretty quick cars. Pretty quick cars.
Yeah, for sure. 3.2 liter twin turbo V8 engine in the car, derived from a 1.6 liter inline 4 turbo that they use in their WRC i30N, I believe. If that sort of sounds familiar, that concept, it's pretty similar to what Glickenhaus had done with the Pipo Motors rally engine, sort of bolted 2 of those together. Now, I'm not saying that Hyundai's doing exactly that. They did note that there were some specifics, parts that were getting carried over. But you'd have to imagine the architecture here is probably something along the lines of, we have a 1.6 liter inline 4, put 2 of those banks together, we have a 3.2 liter twin turbo V8. Saw a similar thing from Glickenhaus with that Pipo Motors V8 that they ran in their hypercar.
And Hyundai, I think they partnered with Pipo Motors for that WRC campaign, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So actually, this engine is based on a similar. Yes, I believe it's based on that same similar Pipo Motors base.
Lots of similarities being drawn here, then.
Yeah. Couple drivers confirmed for this program already as well, despite the fact that we are over a year from this car hitting the track officially for championship running. Being Andre Lauderer, being the first driver confirmed, of course, World Drivers Champion in the number 6 Porsche this past season in the World Endurance Championship, will not be continuing with Porsche next year and was the first 2 drivers confirmed. And then the $1 million question that you and I have been wondering over the past couple of months now is, where's Pipo Derani going to end up in all of this? Well, there we go. Confirmed for the Genesis program. Of course, being announced this early, you'd have to probably imagine that means he's going to be headed over to the World Endurance Championship side of things, at least for year 1. But very great to see him finally landing that factory role that I think he is deserving of. Of course, 2024 was a disappointing season for him and for the Action Express Whelen Cadillac team, but I don't think that should discredit the amount of potential that he has in prototype racing, the amount of talent he's shown in previous years. And he's still a very young driver, all things considered. So really glad to see that he's continuing on in a factory program, just not quite next year.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's the question that we've been asking for weeks, and we finally got confirmation. There was hints that, Pipo he wanted to leave for something that was truly different from what he has been doing the past handful of years, and be in for not that winning championships in IMSA and races and all that aren't challenging, but this is a different challenge at this point, bringing a new manufacturer into the sport. So yeah, great landing spot for Pipo, and honestly Genesis with these are their first 2 drivers, so that's about as good of a start as you can get driver-wise.
Well, hey, you've got IMSA championship winning drivers, you've got WEC championship winning drivers right off the bat. I wouldn't say that's a bad pairing. Now, also worth noting that they will be running in 2025, sort of supporting EDEX Sport in LMP2 in the European Le Mans Series. This is something that was rumored for a few months now. Various outlets were reporting that they'd probably be running some sort of program like that to get Genesis/Hyundai personnel up to speed with the ins and outs of endurance racing. Of course, that program was officially confirmed during this announcement. They will have Logan Sargent, Jamie Chadwick, and Matthias Jober in the European Le Mans Series EDEX Sport LMP2 entry next year. Now, wasn't officially noted whether or not that program or that partnership could continue beyond the 2025 season. Perhaps EDEX Sport supporting that hypercar effort in 2026 and beyond. Although they did note that it is, they're certainly open to the idea of that, depending on how that partnership goes for next year. Again, I think this is another one of those things where it's just very smart of them to go out and get some experience, perhaps maybe an indication of drivers they're at least looking for beyond the 2 that we already have confirmed. It would be definitely great to have a driver like Logan Sargent signed onto that program. Of course, Formula One experience brings Formula One fan eyes onto the sport. But I don't know. What do you think of this idea of them competing in the European Le Mans Series next year?
I mean, it's just another example of how they're doing this rollout, just everything associated with it, sort of in a smart way. Again, this is a brand that doesn't have a big footprint in sports car racing. Of course, they do have a very strong TCR program that strong around the world. But you need to build up a crew that can compete in these long endurance races and just partner with a program that has had success. And it's just very clear what they're trying to do here. They're trying to build up crew experience and just prepare them for what a WEC season is going to be the following year. Of course, is it going to be the same as a WEC season? No, it's not going to be. It is still an ELMS season, but you are going to get some endurance. You are going to get endurance races, and it's going to be just a great like training ground for for that program. So just a really smart decision. Like you said, they didn't confirm if there was going to be any partnership sort of beyond that, beyond 2025, but I think it probably is just going to depend on how things go. But I think you could definitely see a potential continuation there. Maybe the following season, continuing to develop drivers, especially for a following season's IMSA program. So there's a lot going on, and then just on the driver announcements for this entry, Jamie Chadwick, there was a lot of question marks surrounding her of what's her next step. Is she had a very successful season in Indy Next or Indy NXT, and was the question, is she going to go to IndyCar, or is there another path that she's going to take? So a very, very successful driver, and going to be getting an opportunity to potentially race her way into sort of a factory drive here in the next couple of years, which is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Throw in Logan Sargent to the mix as well. It's sports car racing's development pipeline is ex Formula One drivers. So yeah, and lots of them have seen a lot of success. So you see a driver pairing like that, and it's very strong. It's very strong, to say the least, I think.
Yeah, definitely something I'd be keeping my eyes on. And of course, the other thing with EDEX Sport running that P2 program is no entry list is out yet, but I would have to imagine that car's probably going to be running at Le Mans next year. And that, on top of just the experience of running a sports car racing program, would also give that personnel experience in a World Endurance Championship race. And what bigger race in the WEC to get that experience than at Le Mans? To get the ins and outs of the rule set there. I think that would be a great opportunity for them to do that at the biggest race of the year for them.
Yep.
A couple more.
And I just want to confirm one thing too, because I knew I read this somewhere. In the Sports Car 365 article, and it's just noted that none of these drivers in the LMP2 effort have been confirmed as Genesis drivers, of course.
Yep.
But all three of them, including Mathieu Jobert, they've been labeled as part of the Genesis trajectory program. So I would assume kind of like a development program. So definitely worth keeping a very close eye on for them in future rides. Yeah.
Keep your eyes posted for that. Now, just briefly touching on the IMSA side of things here, I know we've been more sort of WEC focused because that program will be on the ground first. Of course, you mentioned Q2 next year, probably around the spring, summertime. We will have a better understanding of who will be partnering with them in IMSA for 2027 and beyond. I know we've tossed around a few names. I wouldn't read into it too much. My understanding is that there's been at least 3 teams that have been in communication, or at least in the discussion pipeline with Hyundai Genesis to potentially run that program. But that's all I would comment for now. That's about as comfortable as I am. Even, asking around about that at the end of last year, it was pretty clear that there's no definitive path for them right now. This is still something that's in evaluation, and by the middle of next year we should have a very clear picture of who they're going to partner with. But it will be a different sort of program than what we're seeing in the WEC, where I want to circle back to what you mentioned earlier. This Genesis Magma Racing probably won't see that specific name in IMSA. From what I understand, is probably going to be more aligned with a specific customer racing team, from what's been described in the press release.
Yeah, maybe something along the lines of Cadillac Wayne Taylor Racing. I would imagine is what we'll see.
Yeah. All right, a lot of questions and comments that were tossed around about Genesis that I want to try to touch on here before we move on. Also, shout out to anybody who was checking us out live for the first time. Nomi Gouda, looks like you were finally able to catch it live after watching too many VODs of this podcast. Appreciate you tuning in live tonight. Is Genesis making it 3 for 3 with Oreca hood boomerangs? Yeah, I guess you I wouldn't consider the Alpine that, because the Alpine sort of has that their nose continue up through the rest of the nose of the car. And it is worth noting that design that Genesis put out is not final. Of course, that could change. But for right now, the front of the car definitely does have similar appearance to what we see with the Acura ARX 06. So happy about Genesis joining the grid. Factory entries, especially from familiar brands, are always welcome. They're proving themselves in motorsport, and I think that is valid and admirable. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. This is a testament to where sports car racing, and particularly this convergence formula, is right now. That we are 2 full seasons into this formula right now, and we're not really slowing down, which I think is something that was, a little bit of a downside of the previous DPI formula that we had in IMSA. Is we were only a few years into it, but we were already talking about the replacement. And I don't think the DPI formula was able to fully live up to what it was initially intended to be, which was a truly international formula that could run in both championships. So what we're seeing right now with LMDh and the Le Mans hypercars, I think, is just testament to the manufacturers that are still interested in joining. And quite frankly, I don't think we've heard the end of the story yet. I would keep your ears open for more positive news in 2025. Is there any chance of a second LMDh manufacturer going for Ligier, or will it stay a Lamborghini show? So this is where we dip into the rumor mill a bit, I suppose. I believe I remember McLaren, if we're, taking their rumors at face value, was reportedly interested in a Ligier chassis LMDh car. Them and Mercedes are really the two that have been in the rumor pipeline the past few months now. And if I remember correctly, I believe McLaren was rumored to be interested in a Ligier chassis. But as of right now, it is, as things are confirmed, it will just be Lamborghini for now. Seems like everyone assumes Ganassi will get the Genesis IMSA program, but is there any chance that Brian Herta Autosport comes in as a dark horse candidate? I wouldn't rule it out entirely. Maybe if we have Andrew in the chat, he can throw us an exclusive, but I wouldn't rule it out. I definitely think they're a team that has been in, I know they're a team that's been in discussion, whether personnel from Brian Herta Autosport themselves have actually discussed with Genesis, or this is just something that's been reported. I'm not 100% sure on, but they are definitely one of the 3 names that I've heard brought up in the past. Still wish it was a Hyundai badged effort, not Genesis, but that's what they want to do. I think that sort of brings forward an interesting point of what manufacturers are trying to market in sports car racing right now.
Yeah.
Particularly in prototype racing almost, but I guess you could say GT as well. Where we're we've seen for a long time now, luxury brands are really taking some of the spotlight in sports car racing. Of course, Cadillac, we have a Cadillac DPI, now we have a Cadillac LMDh car. Lexus, of course, in GT3 has been represented for a handful of years now. I just think for Hyundai, this is a good opportunity for them to expand that brand, which is a very new brand, all things considered. I think they've only really been on the market for maybe 5 years now, maybe a little bit more. But the Genesis mark itself has not been around for very long. So for them to, and I think they, in their press release, they described it as athletic elegance, I believe, is what their mantra is. And if you want to market that, then what better place to do it than out on the racetrack? In terms of, I could see why it'd be great to have it as a Hyundai badge program. You and I have mentioned, Stu, plenty of times that Hyundai has a very long history of representation in IMSA, just not in the WeatherTech Championship. And on the worldwide motorsport scene as well, also plenty of representation in TCR, plenty of representation on the rally stage. And a continuation of that in a prototype program would have been, I think, ideal for some people. But I certainly can understand why they want to put Genesis in the spotlight here.
Well, and one of the comments from the chat too, from Cam, is, I still have to tell people, even car people, what a Genesis is, and it was pointed out by Nomi here that all the more reason for them to compete as that brand is to raise brand awareness about, I think a lot of people have heard of, Genesis has been around for a while, but it used to be under the Hyundai umbrella, and now it's its own separate brand. So really establishing, some differences in that brand is important, and it's exactly for reasons like that. People don't know what Genesis is, and people who are very interested in cars, and now they're going to.
Well, and it's not just that. Already. I mean, look at the top class in IMSA right now. We have, if you look at where Genesis plants themselves on the road car map, I mean, they are a luxury division of Hyundai. They're marketing cars that are north of $40,000 for the most part. I don't know their entire price range off the top of my head. But they are a direct competitor to Cadillac, Acura, BMW. Yep. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're a direct competitor to, say, Porsche, but maybe in a similar-ish price bracket.
Yeah, maybe.
And I just listed off 4 additional manufacturers that are also competing in the GTP class. So I think for them, it's an area that they can slot into pretty seamlessly and go up against brands that they're competing with, not on the track, but also for road car sales as well.
Yep.
Hyundai even has a corner named after their honor at the Nürburgring. It's not Genesis Corner. Yeah, but I wouldn't expect this to have an impact on Hyundai's global motorsports programs. I still would expect to see a continuation of Hyundai's TCR program around the world. I think that has its own place. So what I'm hoping, at least, is that this is just going to be a sort of coexistence between that brand, similar to what we see with Honda and Acura around the world as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a great comparison. Honda and Acura.
Yeah. A couple of people are commenting on the engine that they're using. It looks like it is based on that Pipa Motors V8 or 4-cylinder, which is converted into a V8, very similar to what Glickenhaus was doing. I can't remember if the Glickenhaus was a 3.2 liter or not. I don't believe they were, but I would have to look at that. But I did forget that was something that was also rumored pretty early on as well. And then somebody saying luxury brands in F1 as well. Renault rebadging to Alpine. Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, joined by Cadillac. I think is a big part of the choice that will come down to finances and higher return on investment. It just seems the direction that that brands are going in the global motorsports scene right now. Maybe we'll get the long-awaited Bentley prototype we've been waiting for since the DPI days. Yeah, I think Volkswagen has their hands deep enough in the sports car racing and prototype game right now, although I certainly would not object to it. And I'll take 3.5 liters for the Glickenhaus. Thank you. I love having a live chat that can tell me immediately when I'm misremembering something.
When we're wrong.
Yeah, when we're wrong. Which, again, it's actually appreciated. I'm not saying that sarcastically. And I'll just take this last question before we jump on to the next topic, but I do appreciate everybody asking questions. We'll try to get to some of these later on in the episode. Which LMH manufacturer do you expect is the next to make the jump from WEC to IMSA? It's usually...
The one we've been saying since day one is like Ferrari, but will it ever happen?
That's been brought up today because they just released the Ferrari in iRacing, who has a partnership with IMSA, and they're running it in the IMSA series. And I've seen people saying, "Oh, maybe this is our first hint that they're going to be running that car in real life IMSA." But
maybe that's the exciting announcement that that John Doonan's been hinting at. I wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah.
Oh no, but we can piece all the all the pieces of the puzzle together because Reese's not running a car. Reese isn't on the entry list yet. So
they're just gonna hit us with a surprise 499p at Daytona in January.
Exactly. You know that GIF of the guy. I don't remember what it's from, but he's got like all the strings on the wall and everything.
From Always Sunny, I believe. I think it was Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think that's what that's from.
Yeah, that could be right.
Chat, tell us we're wrong.
Yeah.
To answer the question seriously, though, I'm just doing a think around here. Alpine, I'll tell you, was certainly heavily rumored for a while as partnering up with a team that now has another brand that they're already aligned with. There was a larger sort of backstory there that all fell apart at some point this year. But I wouldn't expect them right now, although I wouldn't entirely rule it out because as far as I'm aware, Alpine is still trying to bring that brand to the United States in the next few years.
Might be 2026 or something that they were slated
something
to.
Around there. I will say Alpine, I guess, because of the cars we have on track right now that are not already in IMSA. I don't think Toyota is really likely. I don't think Ferrari is very likely. I don't think Peugeot is very likely. And Alpine is the only one that we've heard even brought up recently, to my knowledge.
Yeah. I guess the only thing, I mean, you can, I guess, you know what, you can take shots at like any of the manufacturers as to why they wouldn't come to IMSA. I was going to say it's a little bit concerning with the whole F1 engine deal that's been going on with them. It seems like they're trying to cut costs, so it might be difficult for them to try and justify joining, bringing it over to the U.S. market. But you could also easily justify another brand that's recently, joined the IMSA grid in Cupra, and they are coming to the United States in a couple of years, and they're launching this car and wanting to push this car in the Michelin Pilot Challenge to sort of a lead up to that. So I suppose you could see Alpine doing the same, but.
David Land in our chat saying, does Jota coming over with a Cadillac for, say, Daytona count? In this case, no. Because we're talking about manufacturers, I believe, right? So it's not a new manufacturer.
True. Yes.
But, that's something I've always said is you have some customer racing teams over. I guess Jota's not really customer anymore. I mean, they're much more factory than they were when they were running Porsche. Who, of course, always have the opportunity to come over and run in IMSA. That the manufacturer is already signed on. They don't need to do any extra paperwork, I guess. But it just really hasn't paid dividends in the way that I would have hoped. The only real representation we've had is sort of Cadillac did come over with that second Ganassi Cadillac in 2023 to Daytona.
In race one.
Yeah, before their official debut in the WEC. So, but I also don't know if that fully counts because it's a manufacturer that's already in IMSA. Toyota. I think Toyota remembers 92 and 93, and IMSA doesn't want people bringing up sour grapes about domination.
If Mercedes can get over the Le Mans stuff and go back there, then I think Toyota will be fine.
I've said the statute of limitations in sports car racing, things you don't want to talk about, is probably around 25 years. So they're well past that at this point. It's just interesting about Toyota, though, and this is the last point I'll make on this before I move on. But Toyota's motorsports programs, for the longest time, much like Honda's actually, felt very separated, where TRD was a completely separate entity from TGR, Toyota Gazoo Racing, in the same way that HPD was for Honda Racing Global. Honda, of course, and Toyota now have sort of aligned those two different entities together. And Honda has been a little bit more vocal about trying to merge some of those racing programs together. They haven't ruled out the ability to go racing in the WEC with that Acura, even if it ends up being badged as a Honda. Toyota just hasn't been in the conversation, at least yet, although I certainly would welcome it, to do a similar thing themselves, where they try to bring a car over, even for, say, the Rolex 24. And again, I don't think there's anything stopping them from doing that, because they're already an IMSA-approved manufacturer. And to my knowledge, there's nothing from IMSA, unlike the WEC, saying you can't do a one-off race. So something I would love to see them do, but it really hasn't been brought up in any serious discussions, to my knowledge. So keep those questions coming. We'll try to get back to some of those later on. I do want to talk about the next subject we had listed out here. And let's see, we're, a little over half hour into the episode. In the interest of not having a bunch of people tune out, I'm going to limit myself to 10 minutes on this topic, and 10 minutes only.
All
because
right.
I think it's something that doesn't deserve more than 10 minutes of talking, and let's just do it quick. Unlike the format itself, which is the Le Mans qualifying format for 2025 that was just announced a few days ago now. What we have right now at Le Mans is a pretty simple format, all things considered. In fact, it's the same format we have largely for the entire championship now in the WEC. It's the go out for a 1 hour qualifying session, and then the top 12 cars from each class advance over to this sort of pole shootout hyperpole format. I think it is 12 cars, right? I'm not thinking wrong. Or is it 8? 12 cars.
I think you're right with 12. Again. I think it's right.
It has been modified a couple times since its introduction. Next year's format reads as followed. There will be 2 30-minute sessions on Wednesday. We have one session for LMGT3 and LMP2. They'll be combined on track. Top 12 cars from each of those sessions advance on to the hyperpole sessions on Thursday. Then the second of the 2 30-minute sessions is the hypercar class, where the top 15 will advance onto the 2 sessions on Thursday. That's it for Wednesday, 2 30-minute sessions rather than the combined 1 hour session that we had for all classes on track previously. Then on Thursday, we will have 4 combined hyperpole sessions, 2 for the LMGT3 and LMP2 classes combined again, 1 20-minute session where the top 8 advance, and 1 15-minute session to determine the pole winner and the top 8 as well. And then same for the hypercar class, another 20-minute session for the top 10 and a 15-minute session 20-minute session to determine the top 10 that advance, and then a 15-minute session to actually set that top 10. All right, so here's the deal. I don't think it's necessary. I straight up do not think it's necessary. Is this really worth ranting and raving over? At the end of the day, absolutely not. I think I'll go on record of saying, of the big 3 right now, I think Le Mans has the most complete package in terms of a complete auto race. And I'm talking big 3. I'm talking Monaco, Indy 500, and 24 Hours of Le Mans. Hasn't always been that way. Certainly hasn't been for the longest time. But that's just all my opinion, of course. But right now, I think they have the strongest all-around package. And making adjustments to the qualifying format really, to me, is doing nothing, especially for a 24-hour race. They noted the importance of, we had 8 cars, I believe, finish on the lead lap this year, and it shows the importance of qualifying. And I was just thinking, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. How the cars perform in the race doesn't really correlate to how close qualifying was. I mean, you could still have a car start at the back like Toyota did and still be in competition for the win. So I don't really see the point they were trying to make there. But to me, it's just all too complicated. And you might remember last week I was saying I'm all for things in sports, not last week, last episode. I'm all for things in sports car racing that make it simpler, that are not more complicated than they have to be, because in reality, sports car racing is a complicated nuanced beast for casual fans. For people who are just getting into auto racing, it is complicated. You have multiple different classes, all under different rule sets. The cars all look different. They have different varying levels of performance. And I think that that's a hurdle, to be honest with you, to getting people to become committed sports car racing fans, especially when you throw 6-hour, 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour races into the mix. It's definitely not as digestible for a casual fan than an hour and a half long F1 race, where all the cars are, they're very different technically, but largely look pretty similar. So to me, this just falls under one of those unnecessary changes. I think there's another issue that I have with this, though, which is that when you add additional time to a qualifying format and you add additional sessions, it doesn't make it a better, more exciting format by default. And this is actually a similar issue that I have with the Indy 500 qualifying nowadays, where they changed the format a few years ago to include a top 12 and then the top 6 from that top 12 advance. I gotta be honest with you, sitting in the stands at the Indy 500 qualifying session this year, I didn't care about the top 12 shootout. I didn't think it mattered. There was no point there where I was sitting on the edge of my seat saying, because does it really matter? Does the difference between starting in 6th in the Indy 500 versus starting 8th really matter, that it warrants that additional knockout session? To me, I wouldn't say so, and I think this is pretty much a very similar thing. And then the last issue I have with it, just I think, is going on, why is it more complicated than it has to be? We have 12 cars advance on Wednesday from the LMGT3 and LMP2 classes, but 15 in hypercar. We have the top 8 advance in GT3 and LMP2 on Thursday, but the top 10 in hypercar. It's tiny differences. I'm really nitpicking here, but it's tiny differences like that to me, look at that and say, that's going to confuse people. You're going to have the most eyes of the year tuning into this race. Why go through that effort to make it more confusing than it has to be? So I think I'm only 4 minutes left. I'm allowed to rant on this topic. I want to see if you have any thoughts on this one before I see if anybody in the chat wants to chime in.
No, I can. My thoughts on it are, last episode we praised IMSA for, breaking up the GTD and the GTD Pro qualifying to make it easier to understand for fans and make it easier to explain to somebody that's new to the sport. This doesn't make it easier to explain to a new fan. It doesn't make it easier to explain to a casual follower of the sport. So I'm gonna give it a thumbs down on the overall decision. But for fans that are there, I guess there's technically more on track time for the cars, so that isn't a bad thing. But this is more confusing than the format that we had this year, so thumbs down.
That's my question, is do we have more on track time? Of course, there will be a lot more time spent in qualifying itself. I'm waiting for the actual full week schedule to be unveiled so we can see if this takes time away from one of the free practice sessions. Ultimately, I think practice is more important for Le Mans than qualifying, to be honest with you, because you need a car that's going to be fast consistently over the duration of a race in different weather conditions, different temperatures, and you're going to get a lot more time to prepare for that in practice than qualifying. So I hope it doesn't detract from that. If it's just additional on-track session for these cars, you know what? Hey, that's the positive I'll take out of it. Ideally for me, 2-hour session for the standard qualifying, half-hour hyperpole. Yeah. Actually, I think I said you can do 3 20-minute sessions, one for each class. Give each class a little bit of time in the spotlight. There were some traffic issues this year at Le Mans, especially with some red flags getting caused in the qualifying session itself. I don't see how this is going to improve that, because you're just making the main Wednesday qualifying sessions shorter. So if you have, of course, there's less cars on track to cause a red flag, but that doesn't mean one can't happen when cars are running at the limit. And if you do get a red flag, it's an 8.5 mile long track, 13 and change kilometers. So you're sitting at a 3.5 minute warm up lap, 4 minute warm up lap for the GT3 cars. And then, another 4 minute lap for the actual qualifying run. I don't know. I don't know if people are going to get burned there, but we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
I think Aaron Pfeiffer nailed it in the chat. Just a way for Michelin and Goodyear to sell more tires.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll cut myself off there, like a minute short. But I just think, in simple terms, I think it is overcomplicated. I think we're changing things that don't need to be changed. And I said earlier, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is a nice callback to that, because I think this is just another example of things we're trying to fix that really had nothing wrong with them in the first place. Just want to point out one comment here because I thought it was really funny. Tara saying SportsCars is the 400 level university course of racing. Which, not all negatives, because sometimes those 400 level courses are more interesting than the intro classes, but they definitely are more of a challenge if you're going into it blind.
Yep.
A lot more studying to do.
Harder exams.
Yeah. And then I'll just read a couple more off here, actually, while we're seeing that. Crazy idea. The entire hypercar or LMDh field starts first base on the fastest. Sorry, I'm reading this a little wrong, I think. The entire hypercar or LMDh field starts first base on the fastest single car in qualifying. Get some LMDh versus hypercar competition during qualifying. So you mean like single car qualifying? Is that what you're getting at here? Like we have one car go out and do a run? I just want to make sure I'm understanding your idea here.
I saw first base and immediately thought of baseball, so
yeah.
I'm out for help on this.
Yeah. Milton, Venezuela. I was confused hearing Chris explain the new qualifying format, and that's the biggest problem to me. It took me a solid 40 minutes to figure out how this worked, and I'm in the top 1% of fans of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, hands down. So it's quite telling. Okay, let's move things on to the next topic we got over here today, which is Formula One season just wrapped up in Abu Dhabi this past weekend. Didn't take very long to get confirmation of one of their drivers who just departed Formula One and where he's going next year. Kevin Magnussen just signed recently as a BMW Factory Works driver now. We didn't get a whole lot of news out of that initial announcement as to what exactly he would be doing next year. Didn't hear if he'd be running an IMSA or the WEC. But then shortly after, we did hear that he will be making his, I guess, BMW debut, it's safe to say, at the Rolex 24 Daytona, IMSA's season opener, in one of their M Hybrid V8 GTP cars. Stu, I know you as the resident IMSA man. Of course, I'm planning on being at that race as well. It'll be great to see Kevin Magnussen back in IMSA action, where he already has some previous experience with the Ganassi Cadillac DPI program.
And a win.
Yeah, and a win as well before getting that call up to Formula One in the 2022 season, I believe, is when he got that call up back. You may remember he was actually supposed to be a Peugeot factory driver for their 9X8 program, but ultimately got that last minute call up to Haas again, where he had a few seasons there. Want to get some of your thoughts, though, particularly on the announcement that he will be driving at the Rolex 24. We're talking earlier about bringing more eyes onto the sport, as if we need any more fans in attendance at the Rolex 24 with the record crowds we've had recent years. I think this is just another drive to get some more people interested in that race.
Yeah, it's a good signing. I mean, it's a big name, of course, and it brings, a lot of attention with it. But, as we just said, K-Mag, he's a winner in IMSA. He's won in this championship. He's won in a DPI. He was as you mentioned, slated to be part of the Peugeot hypercar program, and got recalled to Formula One. So now Magnussen is coming back with his former Haas teammate Romain Grosjean to do some more sports car racing, and in particular racing in IMSA. So love to see it. Magnussen was actually supposed to race in the Rolex 24 last year in a GT. I don't remember if it was a GTD Pro effort at the time with his father.
Yeah.
That was in the in a Porsche for, I think, with MDK. But unfortunately that didn't end up coming together. He may have been nursing a bit of an injury. So gonna be good to see K-Mag back at the Rolex 24. And one of the things I know I've said kind of towards the end of the IMSA season is that BMW was starting to put things together towards the end of the year, and I think they're going to be a team to watch in 2025. And we could be talking about Magnussen and whatever entry that he's confirmed to be in for that race, being potentially in contention for a race win at the end of it. So this is not just a signing for the spotlight and to bring another big name into the sport. This is we're going to see K-Mag in a lot of big races. So it's great to see, and hopefully we'll see him more in IMSA as the season goes on. Hopefully this is more than just a Rolex 24 entry and is an endurance cup type deal.
Yeah, and interested to see where he ends up on a more frequent basis next year, whether he's full-time in IMSA or the WEC. Still waiting on confirmation for that. But like you said, driver with a proven track history in sports car racing. It's great to see him back on the grid. He's going to bring a lot of people, I think, to a lot of eyes onto the series, which is something that is never a bad thing. Albeit maybe the grids at Daytona will be a little bit more crowded than they were even last year, which I guess, can't complain about that. There was another piece that came out, though. Now, I want to quote SportsCar 365 and give them kudos on the story. I will link it in the description if you want to check it out yourself, which I would advise you do, as always. Stu, I want to get your thoughts on this, though. If you want to take the lead on this, we're getting some news, or not news, because it's still an unconfirmed rumor about the future of Proton's customer Porsche 963 IMSA effort for 2025.
Yeah, so some an interesting quote or statement emerged from this past Saturday's Porsche Night of Champions event over in at their global headquarters. And the interesting statement read that one customer team, JDC Miller Motorsports, will join the factory Porsche Penske Motorsports outfit in the WeatherTech Championship next year. So you read that, and for the past 2 seasons now, we've had Proton and JDC on the grid as customer entries. So it raises questions of what is there. Are we going to see Proton, which has already brought back their commitment to the WeatherTech Championship this year, going from a full season entry to just a Michelin Endurance Cup entry? Could we see that car potentially just not on the grid for those Endurance Cup races next year? And that's what is kind of being suggested here. So there's a lot of different ways that you could look at this as well. Are they just referring to full season entries? That could be totally it. But it certainly is a little bit concerning seeing a quote or a statement emerge from this. So of course Proton has they, again, like I mentioned, they're reeling in their IMSA commitments. They don't have a GT car on the grid either next year. It's only going to be this Michelin Endurance Cup GTP entry. So I hopefully we don't see them. Hopefully we don't see them leave, and we keep that second customer effort on the IMSA grid. But it's certainly a bit of question right now, I think.
Right, and there I do want to comment on one thing, which is that you said they wouldn't have a GT presence. Worth noting, they will be associated with that Iron Dames Porsche GTD Michelin Endurance Cup effort for 25.
Yes,
which was noted in the article as well. You talk about them scaling back this effort. Of course, this sort of goes beyond just IMSA, though. They were rumored for some time to potentially be scaling up to a second car in the WEC for next year. Didn't see that on the official entry list that came out recently. They are just continuing with that one car. And you also mentioned how they're scaling back their Mustang entry that they had in the GTD class as well from this year in IMSA. To me, it's something that was surprising at Petit Le Mans. Just seeing that they were scaling it back to an endurance effort, first of all. This is a team that sure hasn't picked up a race victory yet, but they have had some strong outings. Notably, I think the opening laps of last year's, or 2024's this year's, 6 hours at the Glen was very impressive from Mike Rockenfeller, and certainly showed what that program would have been capable of. It would be very disappointing to not see them on the grid at all in IMSA next year. Perhaps, I guess the option is always there for them to run a sole Rolex 24 program if that's something that they wanted to do. But beyond that, it seems like news is maybe a little pessimistic for a full Michelin Endurance Cup schedule.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well. Proton, one of the sponsors that we've seen jump around from one team to another, sort of in recent IMSA history, is Mustang Sampling, and Mustang Sampling landed with Proton this year, previously with JDC. So, it makes you wonder. Like, JDC has been on the cusp of adding a second 963 to the IMSA grid. It doesn't look like that's going to come to fruition for next year. But if Mustang Sampling did really want to stay, with a presence on the IMSA grid, could this all end up sort of coming out in the wash? I mean, we don't know that Proton is going away yet at all, but there's a lot of like downstream effects that we could potentially see from a decision like this. So I think at this point we just kind of have to monitor any of the news outlets and see, because I'm sure they're going to be digging into a story like this, and especially as the Rolex 24 grid is going to be confirmed before too long here. It's usually December when we get the full grid and what that looks like. So we'll probably have a pretty good indication at that point what Proton's future in IMSA could look like.
Yeah, with any luck, it'll be tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't want to comment too much on this right now, because it will certainly be confirmed in due time. Could very well be before our next episode. But it is something that I did want to note for right now. It is, of course, still a rumor, but one that would be very disappointing, I think, for IMSA.
Yep.
Let's talk about things that might not be so negative, though. Another
yes.
rumor that we had come out today, out of the land up north from me, and the land, I guess, right where you are.
It's a little bit north of me too, so
if we're getting pedantic. Faf Motorsports, though, we talked in the last episode. What is the deal with Faf Motorsports? Where are they going to end up in 2025? We heard some stories come out recently that they sold their McLaren, and you and I I think the previous episode were sort of talking to each other and saying, well, are they selling that McLaren because they're going to buy another McLaren, or are they buying another car? Are they switching manufacturers for the third time in as many years? And it sounds like that is the case. If you want to follow their Instagram post that they put out today, which was simply a black screen with a bull emoji on it. And I will let You interpret that as you will, but there is only one manufacturer in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship that has a bull in their logo, being that of Lamborghini. And of course, Lamborghini having a big shakeup with Iron Lynx in recent times. You have to wonder if this is potentially an indication of where Faf would be ending up next year, and certainly seems like the writing is on the wall with that post that they put up today.
No, I think there's another way we could totally approach this. It's a bull that they posted. Red Bull. Red Bull's associated with Ford in Formula One. Ford has a GT3 car. Faf to Ford confirmed. No.
Red Bull Racing to GTD Pro confirmed is what I'm
There we go. Yeah. There we go. That's exactly what, just, you heard it here first, folks. It's Ford that they're partnering with. But no, I mean, if this does come to fruition, which, a bull is kind of a pretty big indicator of what the future might be there. So that's a great partnership, for both of these brands. Again, if it comes to fruition, Lamborghini, hasn't had the best run of it in recent, in the first couple of seasons with that Evo 2. The Huracan Evo 2, and partnering up with a proven championship winner like Faf, who have had a couple of seasons where they haven't had things go very well for them either. This could be the spark that both of these programs are looking for. So and then ultimately as well, it helps keep Faf on the grid, and there was some question towards on the Road Atlanta weekend or the Petit Le Mans weekend whether they were going to be returning or what the future of that program held. So Lamborghini seems to be what they're hinting at here, and I also believe it is confirmed that that's going to be a Christmas Day announcement. December 25th announcement is what they alluded to with that. So underneath your Christmas tree is going to be presents, and hopefully presents, and maybe, just maybe, there will be a Lamborghini Faf confirmation.
They're gonna have you out at the shop again, making a video on Christmas Day right before.
I'm gonna be coming down the chimney.
Maybe that's a good opportunity for them to promote the plaid. Sort of, plaid's a little Christmassy sometimes. Somebody beat me to the punch. Red and green plaid. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, that works too. A little bit of white in there for bring the Italian flag.
Yeah.
This works.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, and somebody just brought up another good point. So said Lambo, when is Lamborghini creating a new GT3? So that'll be not next year. 26 is when their new GT3 car is debuting, which I guess brings forward an interesting point that, again, should this be confirmed, and we're not completely reading this the wrong way, would only be most likely one season with that car before they end up switching to that completely new car in 2026. Yeah. I know Faf has a very big presence in Canada. If I'm not mistaken, they're one of the largest dealership names in Canada, especially in the Metro Toronto area. I'm guessing they, similar to how they were a McLaren and a Porsche dealer, sell Lamborghinis as well, or?
Yeah, it's a very good question. They do sell Lamborghinis, but I don't think they have the factory dealership for Lamborghini in Canada. Lamborghini may have their own dealerships.
Interesting.
Because I think I'm trying to think of like what we see on the Super Trofeo cars, and they all have a dealership that's backing them, and it's like Lamborghini of Long Beach or something like that. But I know that Faf does sell Lamborghinis, but I think it's only through their they call it Faf Reserve. So and it's more used.
I can't afford that.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing with all of this is, of course, their partnership with McLaren, which going into 24, I think had a lot of optimism. They had this departure from Porsche, which for a lot of people is very disappointing. They were a championship winning team with Porsche. Fan favorite livery on that 911 GT3R, and completely switched track for 24. And it looked like they had solid reason to do it. They had, from what it was described to, it sounded to us like they had a big amount of McLaren backing behind this program. McLaren was going to be a lot more involved as a manufacturer than Porsche was. And what we're seeing now is sort of a complete reversal of that, and them switching manufacturers again to another new one. To me, that's something that's always been surprising, because it sounds like this thing that was hyped up didn't really come out the way it was supposed to be for 24.
Yeah. Sorry, I was a little bit distracted. I was trying to get to the bottom of this whole Lamborghini dealership situation. And then I went on their website, and now there's like an online agent that's trying to talk to me. And
you got their AI talking to you.
I did. Beth was trying to see how I could buy a Lamborghini. Sorry, Beth, I don't have the money to buy a Lamborghini today.
Maybe if Beth wants to confirm that the Lamborghini announcement is actually what's getting confirmed, then that would be great.
That's true, because maybe the AI is learning off of like Lamborghini like internal stuff. So maybe Beth will spill the beans. We can only hope.
We need exclusives here. I would say that's... So I was just talking about how, since you were distracted by our AI companion, how weird it was for Faf to have that trajectory change from 24 to 25.
Yeah.
Where there was so much enthusiasm for them joining McLaren in 24. It seemed like they would have a lot more factory backing behind them. And now they're just doing a real 180.
Yeah. Well, it is odd. You got to think that maybe something has changed at McLaren. But I can't imagine that it's a coincidence that we saw Inception, who, again, we talked about them when they switched to Ferrari, like Optimum Motorsports. They run McLaren's, all over the globe. Inception is basically an Optimum team, and they switched to Ferrari in the second last race of the season. Like, it was kind of an odd move. So, and now if and when this gets confirmed that Faf are again moving away from McLaren, it just kind of raises more questions. Like, what happened? What's going on here that has led to this? Like, I mean, I think all of us would hope that maybe there's something else brewing under the surface, that could be announced at a later time. But I mean, the McLarens they showed some pace in IMSA. They just never really could put it together, and it's unfortunate if we ultimately go down this route where McLaren isn't on the grid next year. So, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to piece this all together yet.
McLaren got the lead of the F1 Constructors Championship and said, "To hell with all this stuff. We don't need this anymore." It's around the same time. It actually is. It was pretty funny.
Oh, okay.
I don't say that genuinely.
That's another pin on the board from earlier. We add some string over there.
I have got a cork board behind me. I think next week I'll you can't see it in frame, but I'll put it more centrally located, and you'll just see a bunch of red string up there.
Perfect.
Yeah, I myself was wondering if this is indication that maybe something on a sports car racing front is brewing beneath the scenes, where McLaren just is not as invested in GT3 racing right now as perhaps they were maybe a year ago. That to me would make sense, because to be honest with you, the rest of the story doesn't make sense to me. You talked about Inception Racing / Optimum Motorsport, who was a very long time McLaren staple, ran with them in British GT, had years of experience running McLarens, making that surprise switch before the season even ended in IMSA to Ferrari. and now we're seeing a similar story with Faf switching after only 1 year of running that car. That would be my, maybe if we got to take a positive out of this, my optimistic assumption is they're brewing something beneath the scenes that's been rumored for some time now, and we just got to wait and see if that actually comes to fruition. But nonetheless, it's certainly another loss. I love to see that diversity in the GT classes in IMSA. So if we don't have a McLaren on the grid next year represented at all, that would certainly be a little bit disappointing to me.
Yeah, definitely.
So I do want to jump back to a couple of the questions because we did get plenty of them this episode, which again, appreciate everybody who is getting those in. Before we wrap things up today, there's a question earlier on from Cam RSR, and I think it's a very good question. Is the Rolex 24 too early in the season?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a couple thoughts on this. I think we sort of think of the Rolex 24 as the circuit racing debut of the year. I think it's beat to the punch by Dakar, and maybe there's a couple other races that are happening around the world in 2000, or at the start of the year. But for sports car racing scene, certainly this is sort of the debut that we look at. We get a lot of fans stateside, probably more North America in general, though. NASCAR fans, IndyCar fans who tune into the race in particular, because there's a lot of crossover there. And I think that crossover is very important for Daytona. I think as the intro race of the season, especially at a track that is sort of synonymous with United States racing, it's really Daytona and Indianapolis are the two tracks that you associate that with. Having that crossover, I think, is very important. So getting that race in before the IndyCar season starts, before the NASCAR season starts, I think is important. The second part of that, though, is there too much of a gap between Daytona and Sebring? Because we run the Rolex 24, there's a lot of great headlines that usually come out of it. There's also some negative headlines that sometimes come out of it. And then we're waiting another month and a half plus before we have another race. So you have all this momentum after the premier race of the year, and then month and a half goes by. And granted, Sebring is probably the second largest race on the calendar. I could say that pretty comfortably. Just doesn't carry that same momentum as if it was 3 weeks after, 2 weeks after, if you want to just do a complete Florida sweep in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Double-sided coin, though, I think, where you definitely want to get it in before the IndyCar and NASCAR season start. You want to get that prime TV time. But that month and a half plus gap that we have going into Sebring might be a little bit too long for the series perspective to carry some of that momentum.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like that the gap is long, and you probably could, there's a West Coast swing that we do after that anyways, that, you could bump up a little bit. The weather isn't going to be, certainly not what it's going to be like at Road America or something in March. But maybe you could reshuffle the schedule a little bit. But for the question of, is the Rolex 24 too early? I think if you ask the fans are going to say heck no. The Rolex 24 is at a great spot. Like you said, it's before the start of IndyCar. It's before the start of F1. It's before the start of NASCAR. It's one of the first major, races of the calendar, of the year. And I think that does a lot for it. So if you talk to the manufacturers, though, I'm sure if you talk to Lamborghini this year and Aston Martin for next year, they would love the Rolex 24 to be bumped back another month, so that they had a little bit more time to homologate their cars in the lead up to that race. So it depends on who you ask, but I don't know. I like the Rolex 24 in that late January time slot. It gives, for those of us that have to deal with, not fun winter, it gives us something to look forward to in the middle of winter. That's for sure.
Yeah, I get my escape to Florida every January, where instead of being 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it's like 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So at night, at least. Although it was pretty warm the last 2 years I went. I've been considered lucky, apparently. So Taurus clarified the qualifying format earlier that was described.
Perfect.
If a hypercar gets pole, every hypercar is at the front of the field in qualifying order, and if an LMDh car is fastest, then they would start ahead of all the hypercars. I think is where you're going here.
Yeah.
Interesting idea. Doesn't really bode well for convergence though, and the idea of convergence because of course then you're sort of separating those two classes again, and I can't imagine the teams would be a massive fan of that idea.
No.
But maybe it would be very interesting for a race like Le Mans where you sort of team up as a team LMDh versus team LMH, and you fighting for who gets the win. Get some inter-manufacturer battle going on there.
This gets a thumbs down from me again because it makes it more complicated.
Don't change it. Listen, you have something, it's working well, don't change it. Has any driver had such a good time at the Rolex 24 they decided to do a full-time sports car racing season? Oh, I am trying to think there.
Do you mean like enjoy themselves, or they had such a successful on track?
So what I will say is I think the Rolex 24 has certainly been used as like a demo run for drivers to get some experience in endurance racing. It sort of slots in nicely as an IMSA endurance race, being the first race of the year. We've had four driver lineups in the past where sometimes that fourth driver is just a complete wild card. Like we've had NASCAR drivers in there before, we've had IndyCar drivers in there quite frequently. I'm sure it's happened, to be honest with you, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Because for the most part, by the time we get to the Rolex 24, team and driver pairings would be confirmed for the entire season.
Yeah.
So I can't think off the top of my head if there's any driver, at least in recent memory, who was only really planned as a one-off for the Rolex, but then decided to continue on with sports car racing. I guess you could take a separate side of that and say maybe they go run in another championship after having a good time at Daytona. It doesn't necessarily have to be IMSA. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, though. It has certainly opened up additional opportunities, though.
Yeah.
For some NASCAR and IndyCar drivers in the past, particularly.
Yeah.
Like Alex Palou is a good example of that, running in Daytona first as his sports car racing debut, and then saw him running at Le Mans last year, where I think he was just phenomenal. I would say driver of the race at Le Mans last year, or this past year, still in 24. Can a driver run? Can a team run 3 cars in the rules? So WEC, no, but there's like gray area to that because of course it does. It's just that one of them is a privateer. In IMSA, I'm not sure. I don't know if you have knowledge. I guess this.
I don't see why not. I don't think there's anything.
I mean,
it's
been done in GT. It's been done in GT before. I'm thinking a while back now, but like with the Fords used to run 4. They ran 4 at Daytona once, I believe. And Porsche, I believe. No, Porsche. Did Porsche ever do an extra car in IMSA? I can't remember. I know they did at Le Mans.
We have Aaron saying that Aaron Pfeiffer, you could run 10 cars in IMSA if you want, and then Andrew Kissinger saying pay up.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so
there's a clear answer. Can be done.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, Brian Herta they run a ton of cars in Michelin Pilot Challenge. So
yeah, I was thinking exclusively in prototype racing because I know there's sort of a push to not allow that in the WEC, and I didn't know if there's any similar rule in place in IMSA. Because there's never been a case where a team has run 3 in IMSA yet, right? Because we've never had that carryover. We had Ganassi do 2 at Daytona one year.
Yeah.
Well, we got the more professional answer anyways, not just us blabbering and saying, I don't know.
John will gladly take your money.
I have a feeling that Proton's realizing what it takes to race in the WEC and IMSA as a privateer. WEC has more global value with Le Mans added to it. Um, I suppose I can certainly see why there would be more exposure for them. They're also a German-based outfit, so for them maybe there is more value in the WEC than in IMSA. I The interesting thing for the privateers is they don't have the same standards to uphold as the uh, factory manufacturers, or the factory teams rather, where they have to run a second car. So Proton really has more flexibility in saying we could run one car in IMSA and one car in the WEC. So I'm not exactly sure, again, if this is confirmed, because it hasn't been yet, but they've already scaled back in one form or another for IMSA for 25. I'm not too sure the exact reasoning behind that. Could be purely financial, could be logistics related, but I would say for them being a European-based outfit, perhaps there is more value. And with the 24 hours of Le Mans, yeah, you might have a point there.
Yeah.
Proton had the throwback liveries last year. What liveries would you like to see brought back? Ooh, good question. I think Proton had the Proton livery that they had in the first few races of the World Endurance Championship last year was phenomenal. The one that was a throwback to the Dower 962. I kind of wish they didn't get rid of it, to be honest with you. The Yost throwback that they had after that, I don't think worked quite as well. Not a bad looking livery by any means, but the one they had before was certainly, I think, a lot better. Me personally, from day one, I've always said Penske's back with Porsche. I would love to see a DHL RS Spider Porsche, because to be honest with you, it's the car that got me into sports car racing in the first place back in 2008. When you're 7 years old, the coolest car with your favorite color is what dictates what team you're cheering for. So when I was 7 years old, that was the case, and I was gladly rooting for the Penske DHL RS Spiders that ultimately stopped running after 08 anyways. So I guess they already had me hooked by that point. So I would love to see a throwback to that now that Penske is back with Porsche. They don't really have DHL in their sponsorship lineup anymore, but even just that color scheme on a 963 to me would be fantastic. How about you?
Yeah, that's a good one. That is a good one. In that same vein, any opportunity at this was kind of taken away from us with the old Audi, R8, though that early to mid to late 2000s, those liveries that ran here in the ALMS. That's what I remember as a kid.
Talk about the Yost one, like the factory ones.
Yeah, like the silver and red, and
yep.
Yeah, seeing those pretty iconic. One that I will say is another one that was brought back. Well, I guess it was 2 years ago now. Was when AO Racing ran the what was it called? Everybody associates them with Rexy now, but it was that very first car. Man, now I can't remember.
The one they ran at Daytona?
Yeah, it was like the orange and blue and white.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I have a sticker of it though, but that one was another beautiful one. There's so many good liveries. You could just go back to the first iteration of GTP and IMSA, and you can grab half the liveries off some of those Porsches, and man, they're gonna look amazing today. But I'd have to sit down and look through some history to give a couple more.
Yeah. I just skipped over a handful of things here. I just realized. Since
Mazda
GT feels...
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Since GT feels almost saturated with mid-engine cars, will a mid-engine manufacturer like Ferrari switch back to front-engined a la the F550 Maranello GT1? I gotta be honest with you, I don't think so, because the proof is in the pudding with mid-engine cars at this point. We saw Porsche, who by all definition doesn't sell a mid-engine 911 road car, switched to putting that engine in front of the rear axle with the GTE car because of the advantages that it brought. Of course, GTE is not a formula we're running anymore. Everything's under GT3. And ultimately, it's not preventing teams from being successful. Lexus has had plenty of success in IMSA with a front-engine car. I can't imagine a scenario, though, where we would see teams start switching back, though. It seems like the trend right now is everybody's switching to mid-engine and not the other way around. In fact, the new Lexus/Toyota GT3 car that's been out testing for 26 is still front-engine. But it seems like everybody else is slowly making that transition over as they continue to with their road cars, which the road car is really what dictates the change anyways.
Yeah.
I don't think GT3 is not turning into what GTE is turned into, which was build a race car first and a road car second. GT3 seems like it's a lot more road car based. So rowing what you brung sort of type of thing.
Yep.
Reading down. Is the Long Beach race too short for IMSA? Hour and 40 minutes. I think we actually discussed this in a previous episode or something similar to this. And I think what we ended up saying was Long Beach is sort of this perfect distance where, because number one, it is a support race for the IndyCar race that weekend anyway, so they're not the main product on track that weekend. But also with the strategy that an hour and 40-minute race brings forward with the decision on whether or not to take tires, we've seen that been a huge influence on the race result the past couple of seasons now, at least in prototype or the GTP class. I don't mind an hour and 40-minute long race there. There's plenty of chaos to be had at those two street circuits, Detroit and Long Beach, in that hour and 40-minute time frame. So adding an extra hour onto that, I don't think quantity is always equal to quality. So in that case right there, I'm personally fine with keeping that race as it is.
Yeah, I agree. Long Beach is fine. We have the expected Road America race is too short comment from Mr. Waffles, and I think we would agree with you on that as well. That is a race that could be extended, but not Long Beach. Long Beach is fine as that sprint, the super sprint type format.
Seeing another comment. Honda just put out a cryptic post. Well, that could be anything. I haven't gotten a chance to look into that yet. Maybe it's another recall for my Honda, but hopefully not.
For your sake, I hope not.
Yeah, I'm curious though. I don't know if I'm assuming this was put on social media though. What they're on about.
It is. This is very interesting. It is a I can describe it live on the spot here. It is Honda Racing HRC. It looks like the side of an LMDh car. You can see there's the word hybrid behind it. There's a Michelin tire on this as well. And yeah, it just says HRC Honda Racing. And I'm looking at the tweet from Honda Racing HRC. And
I'm furiously looking up accounts here. Honda Racing US. I got Honda Racing Global.
This is Honda JP _live. And it is, it does have 118,000 followers, and it's followed by Meyershank Racing. So,
this is the official Honda Japan account. That is the livery they ran at the Las Vegas thing they had, where Sonoda was driving the right. It was Sonoda driving the.
Did they all? Max got a.
No, sorry. Max was driving the GTP car.
Yeah.
So the Indy car was Sonoda. It is that same livery.
That's interesting.
But this did just come out about 50 minutes ago or so, 40 minutes ago, more precisely. Interesting. Curious to see if that turns into anything. Like I said, any big news is going to get announced on a Wednesday right after we have a show. So that's,
this time we beat them to it, because this is coming out from Japan, which Japan right now, it's, I don't know what time. It's like 9 a.m. there. So
yeah, they're about 12 hours ahead.
Yeah.
Quick comment, just saying, what's the delay on the stream, or are you just reading old messages? There's maybe like a 10-second delay, but we just go back and read the later questions later on, which is why sometimes we get to deal with unexpected things where we have to shut off our cameras because we are live. So Aaron said, related to Proton, said money again, no bronze in the car to subsidize it. So this is related to their, I'm assuming their GTD effort that they had to pull back.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, because Ryan Hardwick is going
switching to Porsche.
Yeah.
In the WEC next year. And Aaron, this is actually, you said Champion Racing livery is the only correct answer to the throwback livery question. And that's the one I thought you were talking about, actually, with the IMSA/ALMS Audis when they had the privateer Champion Racing cars.
Those were very good liveries as well. I will say that.
We know the Pug program is Jover when we get a full-on 905 stripe livery. Yeah, well, you know, a loss at what cost? You know, I've been begging for a 905 livery on that 9X8 for as long as it's been around now. So, but no, I don't want to lose that program anytime soon. Honda to IMSA and WC and IMSA confirmed. You heard it here first.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to follow that thing. I don't know if that's representative of anything right now, but interesting nonetheless. And we get our first thing that I get to look up. First tweet I get to look at live on a podcast.
Yeah, we get to describe a picture live on a podcast. Perfect.
Yeah. The expert analysis you get here on the Rain Race podcast. I'll tell you what, I think we're lapped for content here now that we're just theorizing and pulling strings out of thin air.
Yeah, Aaron's just taking shots at me at this point, so yeah. It's about time to wrap it up.
Yeah, it's about time we pack it in for this episode. We will be back again. I want to let you know next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time on U.S. Eastern time, New York time.
I thought you were going to say on USA Network.
Yeah, US.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, that's our exclusive. We signed with NBC.
Yep.
Hey, that'll line up. You know, they got IMSA, they got us.
Exactly.
NBC would be giving me a lot more money than YouTube as well. So, anyways, we're getting sidetracked again. We'll be back next Wednesday, though. It'll be our last episode of the 24 season. Then we'll be off for a couple of weeks, just times coinciding with Christmas and then New Year's. Won't really have anything lined up, but 2025 is around the corner, and you know we're only about a month and a half away from the Rolex 24 at this point. So we are already about halfway into the off season if you count between the last race of the WEC and the first race of the 25 IMSA season. So stay tuned. We'll be around for plenty more episodes going into the new year. Got one more for 24 next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Hope to see you all there. Take care.